In continuing all the Alexander the Great videos that we've watched from Kings and Generals, we basically finished the Alexander the Great videos by Kings and Generals. I've decided that this will be the last one before we move on to the Diadochi Wars. And this is about Alexander the Great and his speech upon the Opis Mutiny, which is just a funny. I love this moment because I always call it the ultimate guilt trip speech. Alexander essentially guilt trips his entire army, flexes on them about how great they've been under his and Philip's leadership, you know, why they basically owe everything to him, and then basically leaves just like a complete like it's kind of like when your parent gives you the disappointed speech, you know. So and it works because everyone wants to reconcile with him. I don't know, I really love this speech. I've seen this video before many years back. So yeah, I never, you know, before I started reacting to history content, so I never thought that, you know, back then, all those years ago, that I'd be watching this like this. But it's kind of cool. I don't know, it feels like a real circle, full come around full circle moment, if you would. So, yeah, let's get to it. This is from Epic History, formerly Epic History TV, now just Epic History. And, yeah, let's get to it, huh? Without any further ado. Okay, in a brilliant 10-year campaign, Alexander and his Macedonian army conquered much of the known world from Egypt to the Indus River. In 324 BC, they returned to Opis near modern Baghdad, where Alexander ordered some of his Macedonian veterans to return home, but angry at perceived insults to their honor, as well as Alexander's adoption of Persian customs, they mutinied. Anymore. Okay, so according to the ancient historian Arrian, Alexander executed 13 ringleaders before confronting the army. Alexander's exact words are not known, but modern historians believe Arrian records the essence of a real moment of history passed down by eyewitnesses.
What I'm about to say isn't meant to stop you returning home. As far as I care, you can go wherever you wish. But I want you to know how you have behaved towards me, and how I have treated you. I'll begin, as is right, with my father, Philip. When he found you, you were mere peasants, wearing hides, tending a few sheep on the mountain slopes, and you could barely defend them from your neighbors. Under him, you began living in cities, with good laws and customs, and he turned you from slaves into rulers over those very barbarians who used to plunder your land. He conquered most of Thrace, taking the best harbors so there was trade and prosperity, and put the mines to steady work. The Thessalians, they used to terrify you. Well, we rule them now. The Athenians and Thebans, always looking for a chance to attack Macedonia, were so humbled, myself playing my small part in the war, that they no longer take tribute from Macedonia, but instead depend upon us for their protection. My father went to the Peloponnese and put their house in order. Then he was declared supreme commander of all the Greeks for the campaign against the Persians. An honor not just for himself, but for all Macedonians. This is what my father Philip did for you. Great.
It's true, Philip's great accomplishments should never be understated, especially considering that Macedonia was kind of seen as like this backwater, even people, backwater place in the Greek world, even people debating if they even should be counted as Greeks at all. And then for Philip to rise and basically claim Greek unity and the hegemony of the Macedonians over the Greek world is astounding. A true, like, genius in every sense of the word.
Enough on its own, but small compared to what you've gained from me.
Again, some people have said this speech just feels very self-aggrandizing from Alexander and arrogant, but like at the same time, he's only speaking facts throughout this entire speech, even if it comes across like that. We'll get to it, but yeah.
I crossed the Hellespont, even though back then the Persians still commanded the sea. I defeated the satraps of the great King Darius, and made you rulers of Ionia, Aeolis, Phrygia, and Lydia, and took Miletus by siege. The rest of the land surrendered willingly, and their wealth became yours. All the riches of Egypt and Cyrene, which I won without a fight, are yours now. Syria, Palestine, Mesopotamia, Babylonia, all belong to you. The wealth of Lydia, the treasures of Persia, the jewels of India and the Outer Sea. You are now satraps. You are generals and captains. What have I held back for myself apart from this purple cloak and diadem? Nothing. No man can point to my riches, only the things I hold in trust for you all. And what would I do with them anyway? I eat what you eat. I get no more rest than you. Many times I have spent the night on watch so that you could sleep soundly. Who among you believes he's worked harder for me than I have for him? Come on! If you've got scars, strip and show them to me. I'll show you mine. There isn't one part of my body, the front at least, that doesn't bear a wound.
I like he mentions not the, in the front, because he never ran away, implying he would never have a wound in the back. At least that's how I always interpreted that, which is kind of an epic flex. I mean, his entire speech is an epic flex, but again, he's telling no lies, everything he's saying, even if you, are of the opinion, yeah, it's arrogant and full of itself, yeah, and, the thing is, it's, the famous quote from that Troy movie from 2004, imagine a king who fights his own battles, wouldn't that be a sight, It's Alexander perfectly embodies that, he didn't treat himself, at least, I mean, obviously he was the king and, ahead of everyone, but he suffered with his men, he marched with his men, he ate with his men, and his mentioning that all he has is, the diadem and the cloak to distinguish himself. If not that, he basically would be the ordinary soldier, which shows that Alexander, I think a great rule of leadership is that never ask something of your underlings that you wouldn't do yourself. And there's a story in the Siege of Tyre that while everyone else was having a break, Alexander continued working, and he kept throwing stones, to build the rampart, and that this motivated his men to get back to work, because he was doing it by himself. And I think that goes to show, I mean, regardless of if that's true or not, it's plausible to believe, because Alexander was that kind of guy. He was not above doing the work, you know what I mean? Suffering with his men, fighting with his men, working alongside his men. That's what made Alexander great, and why his, soldiers loved him. He was a true, you know, soldier, and not afraid to get his hands dirty, which just, again, showed why he gained so much loyalty, you know?
My body's covered in scars from every weapon you can think of. Swords, arrows, stones, clubs. All for the sake of your lives, your glory, and your wealth. And yet here I still am, leading you, as conqueror of land and sea, rivers, mountains, and the plains. We've celebrated our weddings together. Many of your children will be cousins of my own. I've paid off your debts without asking how you got them, even though you're paid well enough and pillage every city we take. Many of you wear golden crowns, badges of courage and honor given you by me. Any one of us who was killed, who met a glorious end, we buried with full honors. Many now stand immortalized by bronze statues in Macedonia. Their families are honored and pay no taxes. Under my command, not one man has been killed fleeing the enemy. And now, I wanted to send back some of you who've been wounded or crippled, or have grown old, to be welcomed back home as heroes. But since you all wish to go, then all of you, go! Go home and tell them that your king, Alexander, conqueror of the Persians, Medes, Bactrians, and Scythians, who now rules over the Parthians, Chorasmians, and Hyrcanians as far as the Caspian Sea, who's marched over the mountains of the Hindu Kush, crossed the Oxus and Tanais rivers, even the Indus, first to cross it since Dionysus himself. I would have crossed the Hyphasis too if you hadn't cowered in fear. Who sailed into the Great Sea from the mouth of the Indus. Who crossed the desert of Gadrosia, where no one had ever led an army. Who took Carmenia, while my fleet sailed the Persian Gulf. When you get home, you tell them that when you made it back to Susa, you abandoned him and went home, leaving him under the protection of the foreigners you'd conquered. Perhaps this report of yours will seem glorious in the eyes of men, and worthy in the eyes of the gods. Be gone!
Yeah, it almost feels like you would owe an apology to the guy after hearing that, right? That's insane. But again, no lies were told. Boy, the biggest flex of all time. Just amazing, you know? After the speech, the Macedonian troops begged Alexander for forgiveness, leading to an emotional reconciliation between the king and his army. Alexander began to plan further conquests, but in Babylon, less than a year later, he succumbed to an unknown illness and died, aged just 32.
Thank you to all the Patreon supporters who...
Again, a great video, and another great moment from Alexander the Great, who we are officially done with now. Tomorrow I'm gonna start Kings and Generals Wars of the Diadochi series, so stay tuned for that, and yeah, bye everyone.